Welcome back to episodes of Kynn. In today's episode, we're going to talk about why some people never feel guilty, no matter what they do, and why that absence is far more revealing and far more dangerous than most people realize. This audio recording includes subtitles, so you can follow along more intentionally and absorb the ideas at your own pace. You've probably met someone like this, or at least heard about them secondhand. They did something that clearly hurt someone, lied, betrayed a trust, used somebody, and discarded them once they weren't useful anymore, and afterward, nothing. No visible discomfort. No apology that felt like it cost them anything. Sometimes not even acknowledgement that anything happened at all. And the strange part isn't just what they did. It's how untouched they seemed by it, as if the part of the mind that's supposed to register wrongdoing simply never switched on. Most people assume this means the person is simply evil, wired differently, missing some essential piece other people have. The real explanation is both less dramatic and more unsettling, because in most cases, the guilt isn't missing. It's being intercepted before it ever has the chance to register. Here's where guilt actually comes from in the first place, and understanding its origin is the key to understanding its absence. Guilt isn't a moral instinct handed down from nowhere. It's built, early, through a specific kind of feedback loop. As a child, you do something that hurts someone, and you watch their reaction, and something in you responds to that reaction. A small, uncomfortable signal that says something went wrong here, pay attention. Over thousands of repetitions, that signal becomes automatic, an internal alarm that fires slightly ahead of your actions, not just after them, warning you before you cross a line you'd regret crossing. For most people, this alarm becomes so reliable it barely feels like a moral choice anymore. It simply feels like something you wouldn't do, the same way you wouldn't touch a hot stove twice. Here's the part that explains why some people seem to have no alarm at all. The alarm doesn't fail to install because someone is fundamentally broken. It fails to install, or gets systematically overridden, for a much more specific reason. Somewhere along the way, that person learned that the discomfort of the alarm was more costly to sit with than the discomfort of ignoring it. And once that lesson gets learned early enough and reinforced often enough, the mind starts doing something efficient and quietly devastating. It stops letting the alarm fully register at all. Not through willpower, through a kind of automatic, preemptive interception, where the justification arrives so fast that the guilt never gets a chance to land before it's already been explained away. This is the actual mechanism, and it's worth sitting with because it explains almost everything about how this pattern operates. For most people, there's a small gap between doing something wrong and constructing a reason why it was actually fine. In that gap, however brief, the discomfort has time to register, and that discomfort is what we call guilt. For someone who never feels guilty, that gap has been trained down to almost nothing. The justification isn't built after the fact to cope with guilt. It arrives simultaneously with the action, or even slightly before it, so smoothly that there's no window left for the alarm to sound at all. They didn't deserve better. I would have done the same in their position. They're overreacting. This isn't cruelty in the way people usually imagine cruelty, deliberate and cold. It's something closer to a reflex, so well practiced, it no longer feels like a decision. And here's what makes this pattern so difficult to spot from the outside, and even harder to spot in yourself if it's happening to you specifically. People who operate this way are often not aware that anything unusual is occurring. They genuinely experience their own actions as reasonable because the explanation arrives before the discomfort does, every single time, which means there's rarely a felt sense of having done anything requiring an explanation in the first place. This is why confronting someone like this rarely produces the reaction you'd expect. You're not trying to break through denial. You're trying to interrupt a process that's already finished running by the time you noticed anything happened. There's a second layer to this, and it explains why the pattern tends to deepen rather than resolve on its own over time. Every time the interception succeeds, every time a justification arrives fast enough to prevent guilt from registering, the pathway gets a little more efficient. This works almost exactly like any other trained response. The brain doesn't distinguish between practicing a skill and practicing an escape from discomfort. Both get faster and more automatic with repetition, which means someone who successfully avoids feeling guilty about a small thing today will find it measurably easier to avoid feeling guilty about a slightly larger thing tomorrow, not because their moral compass eroded through some dramatic corruption, but because the specific muscle responsible for intercepting discomfort before it registers just got a little bit stronger. This also explains something that confuses a lot of people: why individuals who behave this way are so often charming, articulate, and quick on their feet in the moment. The same speed that intercepts guilt before it registers is often the exact same cognitive quickness that produces fast, plausible explanations for other people too. It's not necessarily a coincidence that the person who never seems to feel bad about anything is also unusually good at making you understand, in the moment, why what they did was actually reasonable. The explanation-generating machinery is the same one running in both directions, on themselves and on you. Here's the part that's genuinely important to understand, because it changes how you should actually respond to this pattern in real life, in other people, and possibly in yourself. This isn't primarily a story about evil versus good. It's a story about which discomfort someone learned to prioritize avoiding. Some people learned early that the discomfort of guilt was worth sitting with, because facing it, however uncomfortable, kept them oriented toward people who mattered to them. Other people learned, usually through some combination of environment, reward, and repetition, that the discomfort of guilt was the one to eliminate as efficiently as possible. And once that lesson takes hold, it becomes self-reinforcing, because the world often rewards people who move through it without the drag of guilt slowing them down. They negotiate harder. They cut ties faster. They recover from conflict quicker, at least on the surface, and all of that can look, from the outside, like strength. It isn't strength. It's the absence of a signal that exists specifically to keep people connected to the impact of their own actions, and the absence of that signal doesn't make someone more capable. It makes them more dangerous to the people around them, and more likely to keep repeating harm without ever accumulating the kind of internal resistance that would eventually stop them. So what actually protects against this? Whether you're trying to understand someone else or trying to make sure this pattern never takes hold in yourself. The answer isn't feeling guilty about everything constantly, which is its own kind of dysfunction. It's protecting the gap. That small, uncomfortable space between an action and its justification is not a flaw in the system. It's the entire point of the system, and it's worth treating as something to preserve rather than something to eliminate. When you notice a justification arriving unusually fast, especially one that conveniently removes any responsibility from you, that speed itself is worth pausing on. Not because every quick explanation is dishonest, but because the fastest explanations are exactly the ones most likely to have skipped the discomfort that should have come first. For evaluating other people, this reframes what you're actually looking for. Not whether someone apologizes, because apologies are cheap and easily performed. What matters is whether there's ever a visible gap, a flicker of discomfort, a hesitation, some sign that the alarm sounded before the explanation arrived to smooth it over. Its absence, consistently, across many different situations, tells you something far more reliable about a person's character than anything they've ever said about their own values. Because the truth about guilt is that it was never a punishment the mind inflicts on you for no reason. It's a signal built specifically to keep you tethered to the people you affect, and someone who never feels it isn't free of some unnecessary burden. They've simply lost access to the exact mechanism that would otherwise stop them, quietly, before real damage is done. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've ever noticed how fast your own justifications arrive, or watched someone move through consequences without a flicker of discomfort, leave a comment and let me know what stood out. Chances are, you're not the only one who's noticed this. Thanks for listening to episodes of Kynn. Take care of your mind, and I'll see you in the next episode.